Every day for the past 11 years, I do something super weird every morning. In addition to watching the sun come up, sorry, I had to spit out my coconut oil pull. Good morning. I do something super weird. This weird thing called yoga. It's cool, it works. I got into yoga right around the same time that I started watching the sun rise. And I go outside. Super weird. So without fail, every morning, watch the sunrise, drink my pee. That's a weird other thing that I do that I can, yeah. And I sit down and I do these weird breathing things and kriyas and sometimes some postures to help get me straight, help me get me in the right mode for the day. And because I'm such a weirdo and YouTube is a great place to tell stories, I'm gonna tell you guys a story. And it's not about how I drink my pee, although I have had my own pee for the past 10 years. I want to tell a story about being a yogi and what it's like to be such a weirdo. The story begins when I was a mortgage banker. And I wasn't always healthy, And I was working in a bank. I was working a job I didn't like. This is 2014. I was making a lot of money. I was also weightlifting a lot and exercising a lot. And I consider myself a healthy person. But my health was short-lived, you could say. Short-lived because I was not, I just didn't feel good, I didn't feel good inside my body. I wasn't really very happy. And even though I had all the things that supposedly what we want, it wasn't quite satisfying me until I found my spiritual practice. And, I say spiritual and it's like, what does that mean? What does it mean to be spiritual? What does it mean to be spiritual? Not sure if I know. I'm not sure if I have that figured out yet. But I'm learning. And along the way, I've learned some really cool things. Teaching yoga for 10 years has been a journey of discovering how to make spiritual concepts, make them palatable to a Western audience. People like you and I who I just feel like I needed to be fit, and have money and have the house. And I thought those things would make me happy. I was very wrong. And that's really why I'm sitting here today and what I'm sharing with this channel and what I do for a living. I've been teaching yoga for 10 years. All yoga is doing is unlocking or harnessing the natural energy source that's in the human being that allows us to do anything. And in that time of teaching, I have ran countless retreats. I've opened a yoga school. I I'm an entrepreneur, I'm a creative artist who does art for a living and creates for a living. And part of what I do as my creation is teach yoga and share the things, share the practices and the teachings that have really transformed my life and have, completely reshaped how I live, how I view the world, how I relate to myself, to others. And part of what I want to do in this video is just share with you guys the impact of this journey and what I've learned and the things that I've picked up, over the time, because it's been a very rich and fulfilling journey, but definitely not an easy one. What's the story here? What's the message for you? Well, let me take you on a little journey, tell you some stories of yogi. Have this key that you unlock this power. So after that, of course, we want to hydrate. I think the story begins, I shared a little bit about being a mortgage banker, but I want to share the story about the time I did a 40-day silent retreat by myself for 40 days for my 30th birthday. And I rented a cabin up in Sedona, Arizona, where I planned to be in complete solitude for that entire time. This was 2020. This was right before that thing called COVID happened. And the first 3 or 4 weeks were really challenging. I did not have a fun time, you could say. Like, I was there to work on myself and to sort some things out. I had already had a practice at that point, a pretty solid practice, and I felt confident going in that I could keep myself entertained with my sadhana, this word from the yogic tradition that we call sadhana. It means the spiritual practice, the thing that we do to feel good and to feel connected to ourself and to life. Nadi means river. These are the pathways that prana, the life force, flows. And when they're circulating well, when those nadis are flowing well, it is said that we are in a state of balance, in a state of harmony. These are called energy centers, aka chakras. And as it flows out, prana gives power to perception. To change our experience of life, which is like health, happiness, we must change these circulation pathways. Because the energy, the primal energy that is animating our body, all of our organs, all of the functions in our body, there's an intelligence to that, right? There's an intelligence to it. The path of yoga is about connecting to that intelligence. I'm talking about any practical way that we can use or unite with this energy source. Yeah, how do we connect to that? How do we connect? It's a primal, ancient force. It's far older than the brain. These are patterns of existence. Stories of a Yogi, episode 3, I was talking about the geometries of music, because music is based in certain laws of the universe, right? Like a certain note goes with another note due to a process of mathematics that determines sort of the shape and the actual geometry of the relationship between those two notes. So this is getting deep, right? We're getting a little deep here, but this is an important concept to understand how and why the process of yoga is like it's a universal process, right? Of life coming into harmony with itself. You see what I'm saying? So this is what we call health, right? The word health means to be whole. Well, I went up to that cabin up in Sedona 5 years ago now. That was five and a half years ago, with just the one idea in my mind that if I did my sadhana during that time, in the 40 days, I did my practices, and I gotta say, it was a bit of a crash landing, right? Like to be 40 days by myself, totally in meditation, pretty much all day, every day, and different yogic processes, chanting, pranayamas, kriyas, things like that. And to reintegrate with society, right? And interacting with humans. And I realized that there is a give and a take between us and life. And when we're totally alone, it's far easier to feel and establish that give and take because it's just you and your own energy, or it's just, in this case, it was just me and my own energy. And the forces of nature, the forces of life become far more apparent. You know, it's like there's less noise. Leaving that retreat and coming out, I actually went straight to Costa Rica to lead my first ever international yoga retreat with students of mine that came and flew with me down to Costa Rica. Some people met me here, actually. I wasn't living in Costa Rica at the time, though. I was living in Arizona. And I came down here to facilitate that retreat. It was amazing. I was feeling so lit from my own retreat that I just did, and all that energy was just being given generously around. I came back from the retreat back to Arizona on the last day that Costa Rica had its borders open, because they closed the borders right after that, March 16th, 2020. The international borders closed. COVID happened. And all I could think about when I got back to Arizona, as everything was shutting down and people were being forced to stay inside, we were being forced to stay inside, all I could think about was, how do I get back to nature? How do I get back to that place of balance and harmony and belonging and connectedness that I felt when I was by myself in Sedona on my retreat? I noticed that the only way to do that was to go inward and to connect to it in myself. That regardless of what was happening outside, that I could restore that connection internally. And I promised myself that I would preserve that and honor that force of life in me. And I promised myself that I would do anything that I needed to do to live in a way that could be in balance and in a state of harmony for as much time as possible. Well, I ended up moving to Costa Rica in October of that year, as soon as the borders opened up. That's a story for another time. So there's different forms, there's different brands of that, there's different levels that you can do things that are very powerful and are very strong at awakening the energy.